What kind of man could split rivers with his cloak? Who could speak to iron and watch it rise from the depths like it had breath? How can a man make an axe head, a piece of solid metal weighing nearly 10 pounds, defy gravity and float upon a river? What power could cause wild bears to emerge from the forest, answering a prophet's words like soldiers obeying a commander? Who was this man whose prayer could blind an army and yet heal a leper with nothing but a command to wash? How could the same hands that raised a child from death still bring forth miracles even in the grave when a corpse touched his bones and came back to life? For centuries, scholars and scribes have spoken of his wonders, but few have understood the mystery behind his power. Was it Elijah's mantle or something far greater? Was it the Spirit that fell upon him, or did the Spirit never leave? Because even death itself could not silence this prophet. Stay with us, because in this documentary, we are about to uncover the hidden secrets of Elisha, the man who commanded rivers, defied death, and whose very bones still lived. This is a story they never told you, a story of unending power, divine fire, and the mystery of a prophet who refused to die. Don't blink. The revelation begins now. The sun was sinking over the hills of Gilgal, painting the horizon in gold and scarlet. A hush fell upon the land, as if heaven itself held its breath. At the edge of the dusty road stood a young man named Elisha, son of Shaphat, a farmer's son whose hands were calloused from plowing the earth. Yet this evening, the plow lay abandoned. His eyes were fixed on the aged prophet Elijah, whose weather-beaten cloak rippled like flame in the wind. For years Elisha had served him, pouring water on his hands, studying every miracle, every silence. But now the prophet's tone was different, the air charged with a farewell unspoken. "Elisha," Elijah said softly, "stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Bethel." Elisha stepped forward, voice trembling yet firm. "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." They walked on together. Dust rose behind their sandals like fading memories. From a distance, groups of young prophets whispered, "Do you know your master will be taken from you today?" Elisha only nodded, eyes glistening, heart torn between faith and grief. The journey felt heavier with each step, Gilgal to Bethel, Bethel to Jericho, and at last the banks of the Jordan. The wind thickened. Clouds coiled like serpents of light above them. Something divine was stirring. Elijah turned to his servant and folded his mantle, that rough cloak that smelled of smoke and wilderness. Without a word, he struck the waters. The river split in two. Foam hissed against unseen walls of power, and the two prophets crossed on dry ground. The same Jordan that had carried Israel into promise now opened again, but this time for farewell. On the far bank, Elijah paused. His voice broke through the roar of wind. "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha's reply was like thunder wrapped in humility. "I pray you, let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." Elijah's eyes burned with awe and warning. "You have asked a hard thing. Yet, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so." The earth trembled. Horses of fire blazed from the heavens, chariots of flame circling them in a storm of glory. A whirlwind tore the air apart. Elijah's mantle flew from his shoulders, spinning like a living flame before settling at Elisha's feet. "Elijah, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen." The cry echoed into eternity as Elijah was taken up into the clouds, swallowed by light. Silence. Only the soft rush of the Jordan filled the void where the prophet once stood. The wind cooled. The smell of smoke faded. Elisha knelt, clutching the fallen mantle, still warm. Tears mixed with dust on his face. The mantle was more than cloth. It was the weight of destiny. He wrapped it around his shoulders, trembling beneath its unseen power. He walked back toward the riverbank. The young prophets from afar watched, unsure if the servant would follow his master or fail. Elisha raised the mantle and struck the waters just as Elijah had done. "Where is the Lord?" the God of Elijah. The Jordan answered, split open once again. The waters bowed before the new bearer of heaven's authority. A gasp rippled through the watching sons of the prophets. The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha, they cried, falling to the ground. In that moment, Elisha was no longer the servant. He was the torchbearer of divine fire. Word of Elijah's departure spread swiftly. From Jericho to Bethel, whispers turned to awe. But the people of Jericho approached Elisha with troubled faces. The water of this city is bad, they said, and the land is barren. Elisha's gaze turned toward the shimmering spring that flowed near the gate, a place beautiful but cursed. He asked for a new bowl filled with salt. Standing before the stream, he poured the salt into the water and declared, "Thus says the Lord, I have healed this water. From it there shall be no more death or barrenness." The moment the salt touched the stream, the stench of decay vanished. The air filled with freshness, the ground stirred with green. The miracle was quiet, yet eternal. Even centuries later, travelers spoke of Elisha's spring that never ran dry. The people bowed, knowing the God of Elijah still walked among them. Now through Elisha, night fell over Jericho. Alone, Elisha looked toward the horizon where his master had vanished. Stars flickered above like fragments of that fiery chariot. The wind whispered across the plain, carrying a single question into his heart. Would the world honor or reject the spirit he now carried? He felt both power and weight, the burden of miracles, the loneliness of divine calling. In the distance, torches moved. The sons of the prophets built fires and sang of Elijah's ascent. But Elisha remained still, staring into the embers. He knew this was only the beginning. Ahead lay kings and wars, drought and deliverance, faith and mockery. But for now, he whispered the first of many prayers that would shake nations. God of Elijah, let your servant burn as he burned. The flames reflected in his eyes, the birth of a prophet whose very bones would one day defy death itself. The dawn broke over Jericho, bathing the hills in amber light. Smoke from hearths curled lazily toward the sky, and the air carried whispers. The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. Everywhere he went, people watched him in wonder. Some bowed, others doubted. The sudden absence of Elijah had left a void. The people now looked to this younger prophet to fill it. Elisha walked through the city gate with steady steps. The salt-heeled spring now sparkled beside him, pure and sweet. Farmers lifted their hands in gratitude. Barren fields began to sprout again. Yet behind the praises, a quiet unease lingered. The people wondered, could this man truly command heaven like his master did? He did not answer their questions. His silence was not of pride but of communion, as if every breath carried whispers from the unseen realm. As he left Jericho and began his journey toward Bethel, a place long tainted by idolatry, the wind grew harsh. Crows circled above the barren trees, and a heaviness settled in his heart. He could sense the mockery waiting there, the spirit of defiance that always rises when truth draws near. The road to Bethel wound between low hills scattered with olive trees. It was there, outside the city walls, that a crowd of young men and boys gathered. Their laughter echoed with cruelty. Bethel had long been a center of golden calf worship, and its people despised prophets who spoke of the true God. When Elisha appeared, his mantle trailing dust behind him, the youths pointed and jeered. Look, the bald man. Go up, Baldy. Go up, like Elijah did. Their taunts cut through the air like poisoned arrows. Elisha stopped. His eyes rose toward the heavens. Not in anger, but sorrow. They mocked not his appearance, but the anointing he carried. The same spirit that once called down fire now stirred within him. He turned slowly, and the laughter faded into silence. In the name of the Lord, he said, voice steady as thunder before a storm, may judgment teach you reverence. From the forest's edge, two massive she-bears emerged. their eyes glowing like coals in twilight. The ground trembled beneath their charge. Screams broke through the air as the boys scattered, but judgment was swift. When silence returned, the mocking had ended forever. The people of Bethel never forgot that day. They spoke in hushed tones of the prophet whose words commanded beasts, and how sacred power must never be ridiculed. Elisha walked on without looking back, his face pale beneath the sun. Not in pride, but in grief. The mantle burned heavier on his shoulders. News of Elisha's authority spread beyond Israel's borders. When King Jehoram of Israel, King Jehoshaphat of Judah, and the king of Edom marched against Moab, disaster struck. The desert devoured their water supply. Horses neighed weakly, soldiers collapsed beneath the heat. In desperation, Jehoram cried, "Has the Lord brought us together to deliver us into the hands of Moab?" Jehoshaphat, the godly king, whispered, "Is there no prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of him?" A soldier stepped forward. "Elisha, the son of Shaphat, is here, the one who poured water on Elijah's hands." The king summoned him. Elisha came, calm and resolute, his eyes piercing the royal tents. "Were it not for the presence of Jehoshaphat, I would not even look upon you," he told Jehoram. "But bring me a minstrel." As music filled the air, the Spirit of the Lord fell upon him. His words flowed like water in the desert. "Thus says the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. You shall not see wind or rain, yet the valley shall be filled with water, that you may drink, and Moab shall be delivered into your hands." The soldiers dug. By dawn, the valley shimmered with miraculous water. The sun rose red, and the Moabites, mistaking the reflection for blood, charged blindly, only to meet their defeat. The river had obeyed the prophet. Elisha returned to Israel, where famine had begun to bite the poor. One day, a desperate widow came to him, weeping. "My husband, your servant, is dead," she cried. "The creditor has come to take my 2 sons as slaves." Elisha looked at her gently. "Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Nothing," she said, "except a small jar of oil." He nodded. "Go, borrow vessels, not a few. Shut the door behind you and pour." In trembling faith, she obeyed. One vessel filled, then another. Oil flowed endlessly, glistening like liquid sunlight. When the last jar filled to the brim, the flow stopped. Elisha smiled. "Sell the oil, pay your debt, and live." The woman fell to her knees, tears mixing with joy. It was not just a miracle of oil, it was a miracle of mercy. Word spread again. This prophet not only called down judgment, he also restored life. Days turned into months. Everywhere Elisha went, the earth remembered his touch. Rivers parted, kings trembled, widows sang. But with each miracle came solitude. He began to understand what Elijah had once felt, the loneliness of carrying divine fire among mortal hearts. He climbed a hill outside Samaria as the sun set behind him, his figure a silhouette against the crimson sky. In his hand, the mantle fluttered like living flame. He whispered softly, "Lord, give me strength to bear your power, not as a weapon, but as a witness." Behind him, the wind rose, sweeping through the fields, carrying the echo of prophecy into the coming generations. The name Elisha had become both fear and hope, a living sign that heaven still walked among men. The road from Carmel to Shunem shimmered beneath the noonday sun. Dust rose with each step as Elisha journeyed, Gehazi following close behind with the prophet's staff in hand. Along the way, they often stopped at a certain house, a quiet refuge where kindness lived. There dwelt a wealthy Shunammite woman, graceful and discerning, her eyes gentle yet strong. Whenever Elisha passed by, she would urge him to eat. But one day, she said to her husband, "Behold now, I perceive that this is a holy man of God who passes by us continually. Let us make a small chamber on the wall and put there a bed, a table, a stool, and a lamp, so that whenever he comes, he may rest here." And so it was done. That simple room, whitewashed walls, a clay lamp flickering in the evening, became the prophet's sanctuary. Each time Elisha lay upon the bed, he felt the peace of a home touched by faith. One evening, while the golden light of sunset poured through the window, he turned to Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite woman." When she stood before him, he asked, "You have cared for us with all this kindness. What can be done for you? Shall I speak for you to the king or to the commander of the army?" But she smiled and shook her head. "I dwell among my own people." When she left, Elisha pondered. Gehazi spoke softly, "She has no child, and her husband is old." The prophet nodded. "Call her again." As she stood in the doorway, he spoke the words that would alter her destiny. "About this time next year you shall embrace a son." Her hand trembled. "No, my lord, do not lie to your maidservant." But heaven had already spoken. Seasons turned. The barren courtyard filled with laughter. The woman who had once wept in silence now held a son, her miracle child. His laughter echoed through the stone corridors like sunlight on water. Elisha visited often, smiling as the boy ran to him with joy. The prophet saw in the child a sign of God's mercy, life springing from faith. The Shunammite woman's kindness had drawn heaven's favor, and her home became a living altar. Years passed swiftly. The boy grew strong, chasing birds through the fields. But one harvest morning, as reapers worked beneath the heat, the child cried out, clutching his head, "My head! My head!" The father ordered a servant, "Carry him to his mother." She received him in her arms, heart pounding with fear. She held him upon her knees until noon, and the laughter stopped. His small body fell still, eyes dimming like a candle in the wind. The room turned silent. She did not scream. Instead, she rose, trembling but resolute. She carried the lifeless boy up to the prophet's chamber, laid him upon Elisha's bed, and closed the door. Then she saddled a donkey. Faith had no time for mourning. Her husband, puzzled, called out, "Where are you going today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath." "It shall be well," she replied, urging the donkey forward. Through dust and tears she rode, her heart a storm of pain and belief. She would not stop until she reached the man of God at Mount Carmel. From afar, Elisha saw her approaching and said to Gehazi, "Behold, the Shunammite woman. Run to meet her and ask, 'Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child?'" But she answered only, "It is well." When she came before Elisha, she fell at his feet, gripping them with desperation. Gehazi moved to push her away, but the prophet stopped him. "Let her alone, for her soul is bitter within her, and the Lord has hidden it from me." She cried out, "Did I ask for a son, my Lord? Did I not say, 'Do not deceive me'?" At once, Elisha turned to Gehazi. "Gird up your loins, take my staff in your hand, and go. Lay my staff upon the face of the child." But the mother refused to rise. "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." Elisha met her gaze. It was the same vow he had once spoken to Elijah. Without another word, he rose and followed her. Gehazi arrived first and laid the staff upon the child's face, but there was neither voice nor hearing. When Elisha entered the house, the woman stood at the door, silent, her eyes pleading with heaven. He went up, shut the door behind them both, and prayed. The room glowed with lamplight. He stretched himself upon the child, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands, and the cold flesh began to warm. He rose and walked back and forth across the room, then stretched upon him again. Suddenly, the child sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha called to Gehazi, "Call the Shunammite woman." When she entered, trembling, he said softly, "Take your son." She fell at his feet, overwhelmed, tears streaming onto the stone floor. Then she lifted her child, alive, breathing, and left the room, her faith rewarded beyond measure. The walls that had once heard death now echoed with the sound of restored life. That night, Elisha stood by the window of the upper chamber, looking toward the distant hills. The stars shimmered like eyes of unseen witnesses. His heart was both joyful and heavy. He had touched death, and death had obeyed. Yet he knew this miracle was not his own. It was the breath of God working through fragile flesh. He realized that the same spirit that parted waters and healed cities could also raise the dead. Gehazi entered quietly. "Master," he said, "the woman's joy fills the city. They call you the man whose words carry life." Elisha turned slowly, his gaze distant. "No, Gehazi," he said, "I am only the vessel. The power belongs to the one who sends it." As the prophet's lamp flickered, a soft wind blew through the window, a divine whisper that seemed to say, "The bones that touch life shall not die." Elisha bowed his head in reverence. The miracle at Shunem was not just a story of resurrection. It was a prophecy of the future, when even in death, the presence of God within him would not fade. The sun burned above the deserts of Syria as Naaman, commander of the Syrian army, rode through the dust. His armor gleamed like molten bronze, his voice commanded legions, but beneath the armor, his skin was dying. Leprosy had begun its slow, merciless work. One evening, a servant girl from Israel, taken captive during a raid, whispered to Naaman's wife if my master would go to the prophet in Samaria, he would heal him of his leprosy. Hope flickered in Naaman's heart. The king of Syria sent him with gifts: silver, gold, and fine garments. Letters of royal introduction were delivered to Israel's king, who, terrified, tore his robes. "Am I God," he cried, "to kill and make alive?" But Elisha heard and sent word. "Let him come to me, that he may know there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman's chariots thundered toward Elisha's humble house. Expecting ceremony, he waited for the prophet to emerge. Instead, a messenger came out. "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored." Naaman's pride ignited. "Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel?" He turned away in fury. But his servants reasoned with him. "My father, if the prophet had asked something great, would you not have done it? How much more when he says simply, 'Wash and be clean'?" So Naaman descended to the Jordan. 7 times he dipped beneath the muddy waters. When he rose the 7th time, the blemishes were gone. His flesh became like that of a child. Tears filled his eyes. He returned to Elisha's house, proclaiming, "Now I know there is no God in all the earth but in Israel." Elisha refused his gifts. "As the Lord lives, I will receive none." Naaman bowed deeply. "May your servant henceforth offer sacrifice to none but the Lord." The waters of the Jordan had cleansed more than his skin. They had washed his pride away. As Naaman departed, Gehazi, Elisha's servant, watched the chariots fade into the horizon, eyes glittering with envy. "My master spared the Syrian," he muttered. "As the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something." He pursued Naaman's company, inventing a lie. "My master has sent me," he said, saying, "2 young men of the prophets have come. Give them a talent of silver and 2 garments." Naaman, generous and joyful, granted double. Gehazi returned, hid the treasures in the house, and stood before Elisha as if nothing had happened. "Whence have you come, Gehazi?" "Your servant went nowhere," he replied. Elisha's eyes burned with divine knowing. "Went not my heart with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is this a time to receive money and garments? The leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever." Terror seized Gehazi. His skin turned pale as snow. The same disease that had once marked the Syrian now marked the servant. He fled into the night, and the house of Elisha fell silent. The lesson was carved into eternity. No miracle can live where greed takes root. Years passed. The fame of Elisha spread through nations. But soon came war again. Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, besieged Samaria. Famine gripped the city. Despair turned to madness. Mothers wept, merchants starved, soldiers lost hope. The king of Israel, tormented by hunger and guilt, sent a messenger to Elisha. Behold, this evil is from the Lord. Why should I wait for him any longer? Elisha, calm amid the chaos, spoke words of impossible hope. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about this time, fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, at the gate of Samaria. An officer laughed. Even if the Lord opened windows in heaven, could this be? Elisha's eyes did not waver. You shall see it with your eyes, but shall not eat of it. That night, as the city slept, the Syrian camp heard a sound, a thunder of chariots and horses, a host vast as the sea. Panic seized them. Believing Israel's allies had come, they fled, leaving tents, gold, food, and weapons behind. By morning, lepers wandering outside the gate discovered the deserted camp. News spread. The people rushed out, feasting upon the spoil, and the officer who mocked was trampled in the gate. Elisha's word had come true. But the greatest revelation of Elisha's power came not through famine or plague, but sight. In the valley of Dothan, Elisha and his servant awoke to find the hills surrounded by Syrian soldiers. Spears glinted in the dawn. Horses snorted. Banners of war fluttered against the rising sun. The servant's face drained of color. Alas, my master, what shall we do? Elisha smiled faintly. Fear not, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. He placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and prayed, O Lord, open his eyes that he may see. The servant gasped. The veil lifted. All around them, the mountains blazed with horses and chariots of fire. A heavenly army, vast and bright, encircling the prophet. Elisha raised his hand again. Strike this army with blindness. Suddenly the Syrians stumbled, unable to see. He led them gently into Samaria, and when their eyes were opened again, they found themselves surrounded by Israel's troops. The king asked, trembling, Shall I kill them, my father? Elisha shook his head. Feed them bread and water and send them home. The Syrians departed in peace, for power tempered with mercy is greater than the sword. Years of prophecy had carved wisdom deep into Elisha's face. He stood once more upon Mount Carmel, overlooking valleys that had known war, famine, and miracles. He remembered the bears that answered his word, the waters that healed, the oil that multiplied, the dead that lived. Through it all, he had come to understand one truth. The power of God was not given to destroy, but to reveal, to open blind eyes and hearts. Gehazi was gone. Nations still trembled at his name. Yet Elisha's heart ached for something more than power, for faith that would endure after his voice fell silent. As the wind swept through his mantle, he whispered, Lord, let your light remain, even when your servant is gone. A distant rumble of thunder answered, rolling across the sky like the echo of heavenly chariots. The armies of fire still waited, unseen but ever near, guarding the man whose faith had once made the invisible visible. Morning mist drifted across the Jordan Valley. Near its banks stood a small settlement, the school of the prophets, young men training to serve the God of Israel. Their mentor Elisha had grown old. His hair, once black as raven's wings, was now silver, yet his eyes still burned with quiet fire. Behold, one of the young prophets said, The place where we dwell is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan and cut timber there to build a larger house. Elisha smiled. Go. They pleaded, Be pleased to go with your servants. He nodded. I will go. They journeyed to the riverside, axes ringing through the trees. Laughter echoed between the hills, a rare joy in the life of prophets. But suddenly, a shout broke through the sound of chopping. Alas, my master! It was borrowed. The axe head had flown from its handle and sunk into the muddy Jordan. The young man's face turned pale. Losing another man's tool was shame and debt combined. Elisha walked calmly to the water's edge. The river murmured beneath the morning light. He broke off a stick, cast it into the water, and the iron floated to the surface, shimmering as if alive. "Take it," Elisha said. The young man reached out trembling hands and lifted it, eyes wide in awe. Around them, the students whispered, "Even iron obeys the word of the prophet." The Jordan flowed quietly again, as if bowing before its master. Heaven's power was still with him. Years passed, and the shadow of Syria returned. King Joash of Israel, desperate and fearful, came down to visit Elisha in his illness. The once mighty prophet lay upon his bed, wrapped in a worn mantle, his breath slow but steady. When Joash entered, tears filled his eyes. He fell upon Elisha's face, crying, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen." The same cry Elisha had once shouted to Elijah. The prophet's hand trembled, but his voice still carried command. "Take a bow and arrows." The king obeyed. "Put your hand on the bow," Elisha said. And as the king's hand grasped the weapon, Elisha placed his weak, trembling hand over it. A surge of divine authority flowed through the room. "Open the window eastward," he whispered. "Shoot." The arrow flew into the light, gleaming like fire. "The arrow of the Lord's deliverance," Elisha declared. "You shall smite the Syrians till they are consumed." Then he said, "Take the arrows and strike the ground." Joash struck 3 times and stopped. Elisha's eyes flared with holy frustration. "You should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have consumed Syria entirely. Now you shall strike it only 3 times. He turned his head to the wall, his breath heavy. Even in weakness, his spirit burned like an unquenched flame. The king left in silence, both comforted and warned, for Elisha's words had never failed. Days faded into nights. The house of Elisha grew still. Gehazi, older now, stood once more beside his master, tending him with quiet reverence. Elisha's eyes wandered toward the window, the same window through which Naaman had once departed, healed. Beyond it lay the hills of Dothan, where fiery chariots had once surrounded him. "Master," Gehazi whispered, "you have done all God commanded. Will the Spirit depart with you?" Elisha smiled faintly. "The Spirit of the Lord does not die. It lingers where he wills." As dusk fell, he lifted his frail hands in blessing, one final act of faith. His lips moved in prayer. Then, as the lamp flickered out, the prophet's breathing slowed and stopped. Elisha was gone. Israel mourned. The man who had healed kings, blinded armies, and raised the dead had passed quietly into the eternal light. They buried him in a simple tomb, carved into the rock, and sealed it with stone. The world thought the miracles had ended. Years later, Israel's land lay restless again. Bands of Moabite raiders often invaded at springtime, sweeping through villages like desert wind. One morning, a burial procession moved along the valley near Elisha's tomb. The mourners carried the body of a young man, slain by bandits. But as they came near, they saw another raiding party approaching. Panic seized them. "There is no time," one man shouted. "Throw him into the prophet's tomb." They rolled the stone aside and cast the body into the dark chamber. The corpse struck the bones of Elisha. Suddenly, life surged. The dead man gasped, his eyes flew open. He rose to his feet, breath flooding back into his lungs. The mourners stumbled backward in terror, then fell to their knees in awe. Word spread like wildfire. Even in death, the bones of Elisha give life. From that day, the prophet's grave was no longer a symbol of mourning, but of victory over decay itself. Heaven had confirmed that the Spirit of God cannot be buried. Generations passed, kingdoms fell, empires rose and vanished. But the memory of Elisha remained like fire carved into the soul of Israel. Scholars debated his miracles. Kings told their children of the man who made iron float and death flee. Pilgrims whispered prayers near the site of his tomb, believing that the God who worked through him still listened from heaven. Elisha's life was more than a series of wonders. It was a testimony that divine power transcends flesh. Even bones can carry glory when heaven has touched them. And somewhere, in the quiet of eternity, the spirit that once parted rivers and raised the dead still whispers across ages. Faith never dies. The mantle had fallen long ago, but its flame still burns. In every heart that believes, in every soul that dares to trust the unseen.